I almost didn't go inside that day. I was already halfway turning back to my car when I realized if I don't return this dish now, I probably won't for weeks. And that would have been fine. That's the thing, it really would have been fine. Nothing about that moment felt important. It was just a plate, just a quick stop, just one of those small, forgettable errands you squeeze into a busy day without thinking twice about it. If I had known what that afternoon would become, I would have walked in differently. I would have slowed down before I even knocked. I would have paid attention to the way the air felt, the way the house looked, the way she looked. But I didn't know, so I knocked casually, like I had 100 other things waiting for me. And she called my name from inside. Clear, familiar, certain, the way she always did. Her door wasn't fully closed, it never really was, so I pushed it open and stepped in. And immediately I remember thinking, I shouldn't stay long. I had somewhere to be, something to do, someone to respond to. My life at that time felt like it was finally aligning. Everything was moving, expanding, opening, and I was determined not to fall behind it. She was in the kitchen. Of course she was. There was something about her. She always existed in spaces that required patience. The kitchen, the garden, the quiet corners of a room. Places where things don't rush to meet you, you have to meet them halfway. I held up the dish like proof of my intention to leave quickly. I just came to return this, I said, and she turned to look at me. Not at the dish, at me. And there was something about the way she looked, not intense, not dramatic, just steady. Like she had already decided I wasn't going anywhere. She said softly. Then she wiped her hands on a cloth, walked past me, and set the dish down like it had completed its purpose. Since you're here, she added, almost casually, you might as well stay. I should have said no. Honestly, I meant to say no, but instead I just stood there for a second too long. And that was all she needed, because by the time I gathered my thoughts, she had already reached for something on the counter. Bananas, the kind that had gone too soft to eat the usual way, the kind you either throw away or turn into something else. Come, she said gently, we'll make something. And I remember this so clearly. I almost sighed, not out loud, but internally, because in my mind, this had just turned into something longer than it needed to be. I had plans, important ones, or at least they felt important at the time. Still, I stayed. I set my phone face down on the counter, like that alone would convince me I wasn't thinking about it. She noticed, of course. She always noticed the small things, the things people think they're hiding well. You're always in a hurry, she said. Not judgmental, not even curious, just observant. I gave a small laugh. I have to be. And she didn't challenge that. She never forced her opinions on you. She just showed you something different and let you sit with it. She handed me something simple to do, and I started doing it the way I did everything back then, quickly, efficiently, without really thinking about it. And after a few seconds, I felt her hand lightly touch mine. Not to stop me, just to slow me down. Like this, she said. There was no urgency in her voice, no sense that we needed to finish anything, and that, more than anything, felt unfamiliar to me. Because I was used to movement, to progress, to getting from one point to another as quickly as possible. Standing there, doing something slowly, felt almost uncomfortable, like I was wasting time. We continued like that for a while, quiet, not silent, just peaceful in a way that didn't require constant conversation. And somewhere in the middle of that stillness, something shifted. It was subtle, so subtle that if I hadn't been right there, I might have missed it completely. She stopped what she was doing, not dramatically, just paused, and I looked up at her, expecting her to say something, but she didn't. She just looked at me, and there was a slight confusion in her eyes, like a thought had slipped just out of reach. Then she smiled, politely, almost apologetically, and said, "I'm sorry, remind me who you are again?" I remember blinking, once, twice, because for a second it didn't make sense. I thought maybe I misheard her, or maybe she was joking. So I smiled. But she didn't smile back, not in the same way. She was waiting, calm, patient, as if the answer mattered, but the urgency didn't. And something inside me just dropped. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else would notice, but enough for me to feel it, right there in my chest. I told her my name, I told her how we were related, I filled in the space that had suddenly gone empty for her, and she listened, attentively, kindly, like she was meeting me for the first time, and when I finished, she smiled softly and said, "Oh, that's lovely." Then she went back to what she was doing, like nothing had happened, like the moment hadn't just shifted something irreversible. And I stood there for a second longer than necessary, trying to process something I didn't fully understand yet. Because it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was just quiet and final in a way that didn't announce itself. We continued, but everything felt different after that. I wasn't thinking about my phone anymore. I wasn't thinking about where I needed to be next. Because suddenly, this moment didn't feel replaceable. It didn't feel like something I could come back to later. After a while, she spoke again. Not about what had just happened, not about forgetting, not about anything heavy. Just something simple. "You know," she said, "people always think they have more time." I didn't respond. I just listened. Time to come back later. Time to do things properly. Time to sit when they're less busy. She paused, then added quietly, "And sometimes later never comes. They just don't notice when it stops." That stayed with me, even though at that moment I didn't fully understand it. I felt it, but I hadn't lived it yet. Because the truth is, I had almost made that visit a later. I had almost walked in, dropped the dish, and left, like it didn't matter, like she would always be there, like I had time. When I finally left her house that day, everything outside felt louder than it should have been. My phone, the street, the world I had been so focused on just an hour earlier. But something in me had shifted, quietly, permanently. Over time, her memory faded more. Our conversations became shorter, simpler, and eventually, the version of her that knew me the way she once did disappeared completely. But that afternoon, that ordinary, almost forgettable visit I almost rushed through, it never faded. It stayed exactly the same in my mind. Clear, still, important in a way I didn't recognize when I was living it. And now I understand what she was giving me that day. It wasn't just a moment, it was perspective, the kind you don't appreciate until you've lived enough life to see the pattern. That not everything important announces itself, that the moments we think are small are often the ones that shape us the most, and that the last time rarely feels like the last time while you're in it. So now I try, not perfectly but intentionally, to pause a little longer when I feel the urge to rush, to stay a little longer when something feels quietly meaningful, to listen, even when I think I already know what someone is going to say. Because I've learned that presence isn't something you give when it's convenient, it's something you choose, even when you think you don't have the time. And maybe that was the last thing my grandmother taught me. Not through instructions, not through a long conversation, but through a moment I almost missed. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment you almost rushed through, only to realize later that it mattered more than you thought? I'd really love to hear about it. Take your time and share it in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, quiet, reflective, real, you can subscribe to GistOver Cooking. There's always something meaningful waiting here, even in the simplest moments.